Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's Monday, May the 6th at 7 p.m. and I'd like to welcome everyone to the Township of Adelaide Metcalfe Council meeting. We also have a public meeting that we'll have at the beginning as well to discuss the official plan. And before we get started, I'd like to welcome everybody who's in the gallery and anybody joining us online. And I'd like to take a moment to just quickly go around the horseshoe here and introduce everybody. To my right, I'm Sue Clark, Mayor. To my right is Morgan Calvert, our CAO, Aaron Nordoff, our counselor, Johnny Pereira, our treasurer, Coulter Cahill was here, but he must be upstairs, our Public Works Manager. And the two ladies directly in front of you are Abby Heddle Jacobs and Aaron Besh, two of our planners. Abby's actually from the county, and Aaron does work for the county, but she also works for us. Counselor Betty Ann McKinnon and Counselor Garrett Kingma, and our legislative clerk, Michael Barnier. And we haven't heard from Mike Brody yet, so he's either en route, our counselor, or perhaps stuck in the field. And anyway, we haven't heard from him, so we'll see when he arrives. Okay, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Okay. Seeing none, we have a recommendation that the minutes of the Adelaide Metcalfe Council meeting held on April the 15th, 2024 be adopted as printed. Are there any errors or omissions? I noted one typo on page 3, which I've already brought to the clerk's attention, so he'll fix that. So other than that, we do have that recommendation. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we are going to start the meeting off tonight with the official plan review. And I will now turn it over to Abby and Aaron. Okay. Actually, we have to show a time here. So we have a recommendation that council convene into a public meeting at 7:02 p.m. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Nordoff, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, now Abby, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right, so to start the presentation tonight, I have included this handy dandy timeline that we have had in all of our previous presentations. So as shown on the screen, we are in the period of the statutory open house, but we are also taking a brief pause on the official plan review given the impending provincial changes. So essentially, this is a non-statutory open house. And so essentially what happened was the township circulated notice of the open house in accordance with the Planning Act on April 9th. And we posted it in the banner in accordance with the Planning Act as well, which I think was a few weeks before that. And then during the statutory notice period, the province released a large housing bill and proposed provincial planning statement. So township administration and planning staff had some back and forth about the impact of impending provincial changes. And we decided that it would be best to incorporate any changes that do come to fruition into the existing red line. So as opposed to making an incomplete red line available to members of the public and agencies at this point in time, we're taking a pause and are going to wait for provincial decision. And then we would incorporate those changes into the red line document and then move forward with the statutory requirements of the Planning Act once all of that has been considered by staff. So in terms of this provincial announcement that was made, it included Bill 185, which is the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act, and the proposed new provincial planning statement. We also received a draft planning statement last spring around the exact same time. I don't know if council recalls that. And we never received a provincial decision on that one. So things have been changing quite rapidly at the provincial level. So Bill 185 proposes amendments to the Development Charges Act, the Municipal Act, and the Planning Act, among others. Several of the proposed changes in the bill would undo changes that were previously implemented through past housing bills over the last 3 years. And yeah, my slide just notes that the last 5 or so years have marked a period of like a lot of movement in regards to provincial direction on land use policy legislation and other regulatory affairs in that regard, including changes to the conservation authorities and all of that good stuff. So at a high level, Bill 185 would undo the planning fee refunds that were implemented through Bill 109 in 2022. Which essentially required that council decisions be made within a prescribed time period, or else we would be in a situation where we would be refunding applicants their planning application fees. So those would be removed. They are proposing to remove third-party appeals for official plans and zoning bylaw amendments. So they've already done this with consents and minor variances through previous housing bills. So we'll see how this shakes out. The Community Infrastructure Housing Accelerator that was implemented through Bill 23 would be repealed and replaced with an entirely new framework for requesting an MZO. And so essentially the Community Infrastructure Housing Accelerator, it was almost just a step down from a full MZO, and it municipalities had a little bit more control of them, but like through this, if this legislation is passed as proposed, it would essentially just remove them from the act. And then as well, the minister would be given new regulation making authority to remove zoning barriers for small multi-unit residential developments, or ARUs. In terms of the changes that are proposed to the provincial policy statement, so essentially what the province would be looking to do is to combine the provincial policy statement and a place to grow, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, into one cohesive document that would be called the provincial planning statement. Generally, the policies are a move towards a more permissive planning framework that have less stringent requirements from a growth management perspective. And yeah, as my slide says, the changes as proposed are foundational and would represent a fundamental shift in how municipalities undertake growth management planning. So the province has grouped the proposed policies under 5 pillars. The first being generating an appropriate housing supply. The second, making land available for development. The third, provide infrastructure to support development. The fourth, balance housing with resources. And the fifth, implementation. So in terms of some of the proposed changes that we saw in the previous iteration of the planning statement that we did not see transfer over, was the proposal to provide policies that would allow for residential lot creation in agricultural areas. So as council may recall, last spring in the proposal, the province was proposing to allow residential land lot creation in the agricultural area, totaling 4 lots per agricultural parcel. And the numbers that we ran in the planning department were quite staggering. And I think they kind of received that feedback across the board. So those policies did not make it into this draft planning statement. They were also proposing to allow for a minimum 30-year planning horizon with no maximum. Currently, we plan for a maximum of 25 years. So that also represented a fundamental shift in how we plan. But they have since rethought that. And then the previous draft also did not include the word affordable anywhere in the document. And that proposed change did not remain either. So as I previously mentioned, several of the proposed changes in the current draft would impact how municipalities consider settlement area boundaries. So they would, the province would require that municipalities base population and employment projections on the Ministry of Finance 25-year projections. And the planning statement would provide for a minimum 20-year planning horizon to a maximum of 30 years, which is a little bit different because we plan for a maximum 25 years currently. So essentially, this would just provide municipalities with a little bit more flexibility, which is never a bad thing. We would be moving away from the requirement for a municipal comprehensive review when considering our settlement area boundaries. The criteria for boundary expansions would be lessened. As well, landowners would be able to seek on a case-by-case basis settlement area boundary expansions through privately initiated official plan amendments. And proposed changes to the Planning Act would enable appeals in that regard. So currently, the Planning Act does not allow for official plan amendments, privately initiated official plan amendments that would alter a settlement area boundary to be appealed. The proposed changes in the housing bill would open those up for appeal, which is, again, a fundamental change to what we do now. So if the provincial planning statement is approved as proposed, the township's official plan would require further amendments to the growth management policies, employment policies, additional residential unit policies, among others. That would be largely dependent on how this shakes out and what the province does decide to do. It's very hard to say at this point in time because we are still in the proposal stage. But essentially, in terms of the process that we're in right now, the removal of the requirement for a municipal comprehensive review would provide council with additional flexibility, but would also add some additional complexities in coordinating growth management and infrastructure planning for the township. The potential removal of third-party appeals on the official plan also has some implications for this process. But again, we don't know that that would come to fruition because, again, the bill is still in the proposal stage. And again, this is a fundamental change to how municipalities plan for growth, just given that historically we've tied these types of exercises to more stringent requirements, calculations, numbers, and demonstration of need. And we would be moving away from that if this is approved as proposed. So in terms of next steps, we would be looking to essentially redline the already redlined official plan to incorporate any necessary changes. And that would then be posted on the township's website and circulated to council for feedback. We would then move forward with a statutory public open house. And then 2 weeks following that, we would have our statutory public meeting. And then we would bring the red line plan forward for council's consideration and potential adoption. And all of this is contingent on a provincial decision on the housing bill and the planning statement. So dates are a little bit up in the air at this point in time. But once we do have a little bit more direction on that, we can kind of start to chart the path forward in terms of nailing down our dates. And then I think we're looking to do a council education session or additional presentation on the provincial changes once we have some more direction and hopefully a decision in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Is it fair to say, like a lot of these changes you spoke about, like a lot of these aren't going to directly impact us greatly because of our rural nature, and a lot of these they require infrastructure and services. So I guess one of my questions is, you mentioned on page 18 that the minister would be given new regulation making authority to remove zoning barriers for small multi-unit residential developments. Is that, are we going to have to be on fully serviced lots? Or because there is a need for some people in the community who have offshore labor to be able to put housing on their property, whether it be seasonal or at some point in time. So I don't know if you can speak to that or not.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So I am happy to report that the proposed planning statement does, so they have removed the proposal to include the 4 lots, but they include additional flexibility for housing on farms. So the planning statement actually includes policies that speak to additional residential units in agricultural areas, as well as on-farm housing for farm help. Yeah, so we would get a little bit more policy direction in that regard, which is wholly welcome.
I've read this and reached out to me, stuck their neck out and said, oh, you could have 4 houses or 4 lots on each farm. And then at the county, I think it was 23,000 acres of agricultural land was going to be taken out of production, which is a lot of land. So there was some feedback there, of course. Is there any indication whether they, like this government sort of goes out and then they backtrack, and we're seeing that because this is creating more work for you and you can't really bring this plan home, if you will. Is there anything out there that they might pull it, like they pulled it back, but would they bump it to 2, or is there any, I've had that question asked of me.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything in that regard that they'd be looking to provide for additional flexibility in terms of lot creation in the agricultural areas. I think they received very clear and consistent feedback during like the last iteration of consultation on the previous proposal. And the previous minister like issued like a pretty long worded letter in regards to the proposal to allow for 4 lots. So I haven't heard anything in that regard, but they have committed to providing farmers with additional flexibility to create more housing on each parcel. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions from the councilors? Sure, go ahead, Councillor Kingma.
Yeah, through the mayor. There's one proposed change that didn't make it into our list of um, things to watch out for. The Municipal Act is going to give municipalities some policy authority on reallocating servicing capacity in a service area. My question is, how can that work? Because as far as I know, we technically don't own that capacity. I believe the capacity is owned by landowners.
It's a great question, Councillor Kingman. It's certainly something that we're actively paying attention to. We don't know how that framework may be implemented across other service systems, water, wastewater, public utilities. So we're going to have to dig into what that means for our allocation in terms of our servicing capacity and how we can or may implement a bylaw to either retract certain allocation over time, or we might be in a position where we don't enact those types of tools because we don't have the authority or the ability to. So it'll take quite a bit of investigation once that policy does land for us to be able to really answer that question thoroughly.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Councillor Kingma?
Just a comment through the mayor. I think overall, I'm favorably impressed with some of these changes. I'm in particular thankful that the MZO framework is going to be more transparent. I think we've all read news articles about these seemingly off the wall declarations by a minister telling people that zoning has changed all of a sudden or whatever. So I'm pleased to see that there's going to be a little more transparency and a widely recognized process for making that happen.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? You absolutely can. How are we going to do that? Okay, sure. Yeah, well, you have to because they're recorded, right? So just say your name for the record, please.
John Edwards. I hear a lot of stuff which may go over my head, but I'm here personally because I have family and housing is not affordable, although it looks like we're getting rid of affordable kind of thing. What do we have at the moment that you can build a house on farmland, an extra house? Because I see that you can have a surplus barn if it's surplus to a farm business and you can convert it to a resident, right? I see that you can, if you're a farmer, you can buy another property that has a house and you can sever that house, but you can never build a house at the moment on that other 99 acres that are left, right? So is this what I'm hearing now from the ministry, opening all that up a lot more for the option to build a house? I mean, I don't think we even have the option to build a retirement acreage anymore, do we?
No, there used to be retired farmer. You'd be able to have
Right.
second residence
So,
there.
you know, I have two children. One is a farm worker or farm involved, worked at Dairy Lane. He's had to move to Alberta because he can't afford a house here, right? I have a daughter who's a teacher, and even as farmers, you still need teachers. She can't get a mortgage to be able to build a house. A 1 acre lot on Egerment Road is $335,000 unserviced. So how do we expect to have family members stay in the community?
Yeah, that's why I raised the question about would they pull it back from the 4 proposed to the 2?
Well, I don't want 4, I want 1.
No, I know, well, maybe you want 2, I don't know, but yeah, yeah. I think you're singing to the converted here. I think we sympathize with you because we also see situations where there's somebody builds a new house and there's nothing wrong with the perfectly good house beside it. It's just not brand new and it's livable.
And they have to
But
pull it down.
yeah, which to all of us is crazy, but that's a current provincial policy. So I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, Abby. And you might want to touch on his comment about converting the barn to a house. That's not, or do you want to comment on that, Aaron?
Oh, no, I can certainly comment on that. There's
No,
in terms of converting a barn to a house, there would certainly be implications due to the Ontario Building Code. So I almost think that it would be a question that you could ask the township's chief building official, and they could give you more information about that. But in terms of what the province is proposing today, they are proposing to allow farm families to have more dwelling units on their farm parcels in the form of additional residential units. So you don't have to apply for a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment to establish a garden suite. You can have up to 2 full permanent dwelling structures on your farm parcel. How those look, I'm not entirely sure like what the province's intent in that regard is at this point. Whether that would be supporting somebody who's built a new home and has their second like older house on the lot. I'm not entirely sure at this point. If that was the province's intention for this. Staff are still at the point where we're kind of digesting everything that's being proposed and trying to figure out what the province's intentions are. But like one thing that I can say is clear is that they are trying to make it easier for farmers to build additional dwelling units on their farm parcels for family members and for farm help as well.
But just to clarify, I don't want to mislead anyone.
Yeah.
When you're saying an ARU, the accessory residential unit, you're talking a little garden suite, or you're talking where I can put up a 2-car garage and then I can put accommodations above it. So that's not really a full separate house, which, John's sort of alluding to.
Yeah, that's correct. And I guess that's kind of like what staff would be looking for direction from the ministry on, whether it would look like two separate dwellings if it was a situation whereby somebody had applied for a temporary use zone to build a new dwelling and be able to retain that second dwelling. We would need a little bit more direction from the ministry on that in order to provide members of the public with a little bit more clarity.
Favorable. Second of all, it does need to be subordinate to the primary dwelling. So again, that's something that is smaller in size. I think where we're kind of running into some sort of terminology confusion is when we have someone who says they have a very small, say 800 square foot house. They want to build a 3,000 square foot house. Does this first house now qualify as a accessory unit? And that is where we have reached out to the province and asked for clarification on that. So hopefully through the next, once they're done their consultation period and they provide clarity, we'll have some more idea about that. But it will be certainly up to council to provide some criteria on what you want the ARUs to look like.
Well, and I think that's the purpose of the public meeting tonight, is take feedback such as yours, which does support some of our thoughts that we've already been talking about, and to make those known.
Just a quick question, I guess. Why did the 1 acre retirement severance get lost? I mean, it was in Lobo long after it was in Adelaide. So when was that cancelled and why can't it be readopted?
That's a good question. Me personally, I was aware that we had it in Metcalfe prior to amalgamation. I wasn't aware that it was in Adelaide. So possibly that was, I mean, the province dictates that too, right? It's not
Oh, okay.
always decided here.
I thought it
So
was.
no,
the
because
township.
I think when you look at our community, you look at our tax base, it's 62% rural, like it's significant, right? So that program probably would have been very good if it stayed in place for our municipality, but they did not.
Well, I understand the being able to sever out of a house if it's surplus to someone's requirement because they've got multiple farms was to stop people from pulling the house down because they didn't want to pay taxes on it. So if it was usable, it was allowed to then sever. What in my mind doesn't make much sense. You now got 100 acres or say, or 99 acres that apparently you can never put a house on it until there's a change.
No.
Yeah, and anybody who's farming in a significant way typically has more than one house, and sometimes they don't want a tenant, and it would actually be better. Like the reason it was supported years ago when it was voted on was because then you get people who buy those surplus farm dwellings, they take pride in ownership and they contribute to the community.
Right.
So I think I speak for everybody on
I
that.
look at my property and it's basically what, 20,000 an acre is about the approximate price as I look for. Well, not much because there's 150 acres up our road that's 3 million. So it's about 20,000 an acre. So I could sever off $20,000 acre for my daughter as compared to paying 339,000 for an acre down the road, which is already severed somehow.
No.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, we appreciate your feedback, John, and you're singing to the choir up here,
Yeah.
so.
I just don't want to lose my daughter as well to our work.
No, we get it, and many of us around the table have multiple children, and it is a challenge, that's for sure. So is there anyone else in the gallery that had any comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, then we have a recommendation that council adjourn the public meeting at 7:30 PM and reconvene into our regular session of council. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor Nordoff, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. So I think I speak for everybody. We look forward to where the government lands on some of this stuff. And it keeps changing. It's like hitting a moving target, right? So,
Interesting.
well, yeah, because you go down a certain lane and then you have to change, right? So, okay. Well, ladies, thanks for coming. If you want to stick around, that's great. And if you don't, that's okay too. Yeah, and thanks to those who did come. I know, I know. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for your feedback, John. I appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, next on the agenda, 6A, upcoming conferences, seminars, and meetings. The next council meeting for Adelaide Metcalfe is May 21st at 7 PM. And that's, please note, that's a Tuesday. That's after the long weekend. And then the one after that will be June 17th, and that too is at 7 PM. Okay, recommended readings, CC number 1, the Asable Bayfield Conservation Authority Board minute meetings. CC number 2, the Municipal Finance Officers Association Federal Budget Summary. Thought that was an interesting read. And Blue Water Recycling Association. I hope everybody took time to read that. I found it very interesting that the commodity revenue was down $1 million. That's significant. And I know that you're at the mercy of what the price of commodities are. Do you have anything you want to add to Garrett? Councillor Kingma sits on the Blue Water Board for us.
Yeah, thank you. The annual general meeting was actually quite interesting. I guess one item I could pick out from all of the topics discussed was the federal carbon tax and how it's being influencing some of the decision-making at the association. The carbon tax is making the use of diesel trucks increasingly unworkable. That's how high the tax is. So the association is focusing more on renewable natural gas in the interim as a means to be cost effective. But in the long term, they want to electrify their entire fleet. They're at this current time, that's not going to work. One truck is $1.1 million, and the range of that truck is only 10% of a route, as a general rule. Yeah, so right now, the fundamentals just aren't there to electrify the fleet, and the return on investment doesn't work either because the truck will be dead long before you get your money out of it. So, yeah, there was a lot to discuss about that. So that's a huge challenge.
Okay, thank you. CC number 4, Middlesex London Health Unit, Board of Health meeting summary from April 18th. And the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, MPAC, their annual report. Action required items, CC number 6, we have a resolution from the City of St. Catharines to restrict keeping of non-native exotic wild animals. CC number 7, a resolution from Prince Edward County regarding municipal accessibility funding. CC number 8, a resolution from the Township of Amaranth, I always hesitate when I say that, regarding the operational budget funding. CC number 9, a resolution from the municipality of Huron Shores to resume assessment cycle. Councillor Kingma? Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, that's seconded by Councillor Kingma. All in favor? That's carried. Yeah, I know that housing prices went up a lot and they've come back off, but there hasn't been any change since 2016, and we're still operating with 2016 dollars, and things don't cost 2016 prices. So, all right, CC number 10, a resolution from the City of St. Charles regarding household food insecurity. CC number 11, a resolution from the municipality of Trent Hills regarding funding of social services. And CC number 12, a resolution from the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus to regarding the support of small business enterprise centers. Counselor Kingma?
I'd like it if we could support WOWC with this because they need continued funding for these small business enterprise centers. I think entrepreneurs actually look to a single agency oftentimes in order to get their ideas off the ground. So I think support would be appropriate.
You'll move that then? Okay. And a seconder? Counselor Brody, but further discussion, I would like that possibly amended to include consideration with partnering with the Community Futures Development Corp. Because some of the services are similar. And when you look at where the small business centers are, they're not in a lot of the rural areas that the CFDC support. So I think it'd be interesting to see if they could partner somehow. Okay, all in favor? Are you guys okay with that amendment? Sorry, I should ask you that just instead of running it down your throat. Okay, all right. So could I have a motion to receive and file CC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11? Moved by Counselor Brody, seconded by Counselor Nordoff. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, next up are the staff reports. And Andrew, you're on the line there. Perfect. Okay, I'll turn this section of the meeting over to you, Andrew, and you can start with the Lenting Drain Branch J.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Lenting Drain was originally constructed under an engineer's report in 1960 with multiple branches from A to U. Further to this report, there have been multiple subsequent reports for various projects on different branches. Branch J specifically was reconstructed as recently as 1997, but it was further upstream. The portion of the drain in question that we're looking at right now still dates from 1960. In June of last year, the owner of east part of Lot 4, Concession 2, the previous township of Adelaide, and staff had met at the property. While on site, it was discussed that the drain had broken and created multiple sinkholes over the recent years. And further to this, the drain was not removing water to the current expectations. It was decided the best course of action was drain reconstruction. However, at that time, no request was submitted. For reference, the map on the document shows the Lenting Drain Branch J placement in bold blue line. The property that's highlighted in yellow is the property that submitted the request. At this point, the project would only include this property. However, it's staff's intention to send out notices to all upstream landowners to see if there's any interest to expand the project. Recommendation is that council accepts the request to reconstruct part or all of the Lenting Drain Branch J in response to the request received by the owner of east part of Lot 4, Concession 2, NER, previous township of Adelaide under Section 78 of the Drainage Act. And further to that, council directs staff to procure a drainage engineer in accordance with the township procurement policy. And I am up for questions if there are any.
Okay, are there any questions for Andrew on this Lenting Drain? Seeing none, then I won't bore you with repeating the recommendation. You have it in front of you and Andrew's already read it off. So could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Counselor Kingma, seconded by Counselor Nordoff. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, the next one's yours as well, Andrew, the winter drain. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Since January of this past year, staff have been in discussions with the landowners of part of Lot 7 and 8, Concession 8, and Lot 6, Concession 7, the former township of Metcalfe, regarding the options to the condition of the winter drain. It was noted that this drain was not flowing as it had in the past. As a response to this, staff carried out a limited investigation on the drain. A large hole on the drain was located on the east side of Kerwood Road. Subsequently, the owners of Lot 6, Concession 7 notified staff that there were multiple holes in the drain throughout their property. Staff examined the drain files and found that there have been many holes over the recent years in the drain. Given the condition of the drain and the age, it's from 1948, it was recommended to both property owners that the best long-term solution would be a reconstruction of the drain. As a result, the owners submitted a request to reconstruct the drain under Section 78 of the Drainage Act. Recommendation that council accept the request to reconstruct the winter drain submitted by property owner, part of Lot 7 and 8, Concession 8, and Lot 6, Concession 7, Geographic Township of Metcalfe under Section 78 of the Drainage Act, and that council direct staff to procure a drainage engineer in accordance with the procurement policy. And I'm up for questions.
Okay, any questions for Andrew on the winter drain? Seeing none then, he's already read the recommendation. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. And the next one's yours too, Andrew, the Baker drain.
Thank you. In October of 2022, council appointed Spreet and Associates to reconstruct the Baker drain under Section 78 of the Act. After correspondence with the owners, there was a meeting to discuss the draft plan and assessments toward this project this past fall. At the meeting, one of the landowners indicated that they would like to see an alternative placement of the drain. It was explained to the owner if they would like to change the placement, they would need to submit a petition under Section 4. 78 only allows for reconstruction more or less in the same placement as the old drain. After further discussion and correspondence, the owner of North Part Lot 12, Concession 13, former Township of Metcalfe, submitted a petition in March of 24 to change the placement of a portion of the drain. The map that has been provided shows a rough concept of where the owner would prefer a portion of the drain to be located, indicated with a red line. A small portion of the bottom end of the drain would be reconstructed in its original placement. The portion of the municipal drain in between the two proposed drains in red would be abandoned. So if this proceeds, it would effectively break the drain into two sub-watersheds. The recommendation at this point is that council appoint Spreet Associates to redirect the reconstruction of the Baker drain from a petition under Section 4 of the Drainage Act received from the owner of North Part of Lot 12, Concession 13, former Township of Metcalfe, and this is a subsequent petition to an ongoing project.
Okay,
I'm up.
thank you, Andrew.
Question.
Any,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I said, thank you. Any questions for Andrew? Okay, seeing none, he's made the recommendation. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Nordoff. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, next up, 7D is an application for a tile loan from Margaret Settler, and I'll turn this over to our treasurer, Johnny Pereira.
Thank you, Mayor Clerk, through the council. So we have another tile loan application, as the mayor mentioned, from Margaret Sattler. So typically, tile loan applications are received prior to tile installation begins. All loans have a 10-year term, and interest is calculated at a rate of 6% annually, with repayments included on the property owner's property tax bill. The township would then repay the province annually when billed. The total amount of the tile loan is restricted to 75% of the total cost of the project, to an annual maximum of $50,000 a year. Staff received this application for a tile loan, which is attached to the report. The request is for $25,000. With this specific application, the installation is actually in progress. which does deviate from the typical protocol. However, OMAFRA has confirmed that there is no issues for this application. If approved, the drainage inspector will evaluate the tiling work by the licensed contractor and complete an inspection report while obtaining the drainage plan and final invoice. The treasurer will relay the loan documentation and draft a debenture to OMAFRA for processing and approval. Staff will then bring a rating bylaw forward to council for approval. From a financial perspective, there is minimal impact to the township. There is an administration fee of $200 applied for all tile loans to aid in cost recovery. The recommendation is to approve the report as presented. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I think that's straightforward. Are there any questions though? Okay, seeing none, we have a recommendation that the application submitted by Margaret Settler for the tile drain loan on concession 2, west part of lot 9, former Township of Metcalfe, be approved in accordance with OMAFRA's policies for tile drainage for the current year, subject to approval and funding from OMAFRA. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor Nordoff. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And 7E, we'll continue on with Johnny and regarding our operating budget.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through the council. So we have in front of us the March 2024 budget actual report. We are still pretty early in the year. Most of the township's expenses occur in public works, which many projects are to occur in the coming months. So overall spending and revenue collection to date looks to be on pace with the approved budget. The recommendation is to receive the report as presented. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the treasurer? Okay, seeing none, then we have a recommendation that the operating budget to actual report for March 2024 be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor Nordoff. All in favor? And that's carried. And capital budget to actual. Johnny, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the council. So we have the Q1 capital report that just outlines the capital projects for the year with spending to March 31st. This report outlines the status of our capital projects, projected start dates, and any relevant comments. As with the previous report, we are still pretty early in the year for many of these projects. Staff does review capital spending on a monthly basis, and the report is brought to council to outline any significant overages and a financial strategy to address it. Through the end of March, we have completed one of our 12 projects for the year, a number of which are still active. The recommendation is to receive the report as presented, but be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Johnny on capital budget to actual Q1? Councillor Kingma?
Just a comment. I think I recall previously that the new tanker would show up at Christmas 2025. It says August 2025. Am I reading that right? Is that good news?
Thank you, Councillor Kingma. I think that is a typo. I know we did have December of 2025. Hopeful for summer, but definitely the end of the year. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, then we have a recommendation that the capital budget to actual report for Q1 be received for information. Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And your last report, Johnny, the 2024 annual repayment limit.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the council. So the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing prepares for each municipality its annual repayment limit in regarding to long-term debt. The annual repayment limit is calculated based on the data contained in the 2022 financial information return. It represents the maximum amount the township had available at December 31st, 2022 to commit to payments relating to debt and financial obligations. The limit is calculated at 25% of our own source revenues. Based on the calculated amount, the township has a capacity to borrow an amount that would result in payments equal to or less than around $1,026,000 effective in January of 2024. And that is after factoring in a number of adjustments for active commitments that we incur throughout the year, specifically drainage. So based on the information presented, the township has a sufficient amount of borrowing capacity. The recommendation is to receive the report as presented. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Johnny? Seeing none, then we have that recommendation that the 2024 annual repayment limit report be received for information. Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor McKinnon, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. Is there any other business? Councillor Kingma?
Yes, through the mayor to Johnny. I'm wondering, I think it was in December, we approved the asset retirement obligation policy. And I'm wondering if staff have had any opportunity yet to do a comprehensive review of all our tangible assets and see which ones are legally required to be retired.
Through the mayor to Councilor Kima. Great question. So we haven't jumped fully into that yet, just with some time restrictions. We had some early discussions internally with staff, understanding any significant risks in the township. From a high level, there doesn't seem to be any. We did have discussions with the auditors who were on site. They were looking at a few categories, one of which, if we're aware of any buildings with asbestos or any buried tanks under the ground. And then the last one was the landfill. The landfill, we actually are on top of that. We have reports every 2 years about our liability. We have a reserve set up for that future obligation as well. But for those other two categories, nothing has come to the table. But as far as the deep dive into all the assets, that is still to come later this year. The goal was in Q1 of this year, but that had to be deferred with some other conflicting projects in the year.
Thank you. Any other business? Okay, seeing none then, we have a recommendation that bylaw 17 of 2024, the topping drain from 2023, receive third and final reading. Do you want those separate motions, please? Okay. Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor Nordoff, all in favor, and that's carried. And another recommendation that bylaw 33 of 2024, the drain maintenance, and bylaw 34 of 2024, confirming May 6th, 2024, receive first, second, and third and final readings. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Kingma. All those in favor? And that's carried. And could I have a motion to adjourn at 7:53 p.m.? Moved by Councillor Brody, seconded by Councillor Nordoff. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.